And now I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, we'd like to greet you, Mr. Minister, you here and Germany here in the President's chair, and would like to thank France for a very productive month of March. We're also grateful to the briefers, to Mr. Lowcock, Mr. Maurer, Ms. Mordirzadeh. We thank you for very interesting considerations. Putting together a body of rules under international humanitarian law is one of the major accomplishments of the 20th century. Humanism, including humanism under the conditions of an armed conflict, or even, I would go so far as to say, on the field of battle, is a hallmark of civilized behavior. Unfortunately, almost 74 years after the end of the Second World War, the Security Council has to, time and again, address the issue of strengthening the international humanitarian law institutions. Our goal is to make sure that the authority and prestige of the IHL is not undermined. What is needed for that is to move away from selective approaches and double standards, where, depending on political preferences, some violations are emphasized, underscored, and violations of others are passed over in silence. And the president of the International Committee of the Red Cross addressed that very eloquently. Our goal is as well to consistently strengthen the existing mechanisms in the area of international humanitarian law, and we are of the view that at present we have a sufficient number of that. This was also confirmed by the outcome of the interstate process on strengthening compliance with the IHL, which came out on the 15th of March of this year as a decision of the 32nd Red Cross Conference. And we're convinced that the implementation issues that we hear about all the time arise not because of the weakness of the international humanitarian law, but rather because there is a lack of determination to implement its principles and standards in practice. Given that we have constant armed conflicts, extending humanitarian assistance is coming to the fore. In the protection of the humanitarians and medical workers is one of the major aspects of a protection of civilian issues. The responsibility for their safety belongs with all belligerent parties, and Russia has consistently called on the belligerent sides to undertake all measures necessary to ensure the safety of those who are extending humanitarian and medical assistance. At the same time, we note that the proposal coming from everywhere to involve the Security Council in the architecture of bringing the perpetrators of IHL violations to justice is something that we need to discuss very carefully. Very recently, the reliability of data in order to determine who is responsible, who is a perpetrator, is something that is less of an interest to states. They are interested in something else. One of the main preconditions for the effective protection of humanitarian organizations and medical workers is making sure that they themselves abide by the guiding principles of international humanitarian assistance. And this includes respect for the sovereignty, humanitarian, impartial, and neutral nature of their humanitarian assistance. Medical and humanitarian workers who are in areas of conflict have to abide by the laws of the country they find themselves in, and I think this is a basic truth. It is unacceptable to have a situation where medical and humanitarian organizations openly aid terrorists to carry out their cruel plans, as is being done by the White Helmets in Syria. This kind of activity conducted by pseudo-humanitarians, when they manipulate the issue of medical assistance and humanitarian assistance in armed conflicts, leads to the undermining of the international humanitarian law systems, and then bounces off and undermines the standing of genuine humanitarian and medical workers. Last week when the Security Council was working on the resolution on combating the financing of terrorism, something that gave rise to a great deal of resonance. It was number 2462. When we were discussing that, one of the main issues there was ensuring unimpeded access to humanitarian organizations and extending medical assistance in the area of armed conflicts and areas of counterterrorism activities. Through joint efforts, the Council arrived at a balanced wording. What is to be protected is, and let me quote, exclusively humanitarian activities, including medical activities, that are carried out by impartial humanitarian actors in a manner consistent with international humanitarian law. By the way, and I would like to thank the International Committee of the Red Cross for drawing attention to this topic and for their assistance within this process. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation.